most of the students are from second year and first year, right? And some
Yes.
third years. And are there any alumni?
No, sir, no alumni. So all the presenters are from third year or final year. Others are from first and second year.
Okay. So you want to start maybe by telling something about yourself to me, or shall I begin directly?
Okay, so I think we can begin the session now. So
Okay.
just give a brief introduction of yours. So to begin with, like most of you people have seen the notice for the talk. So sir's brief description was there. So just to begin with, like, so Anshul sir is an NIT Nagpur alumnus, and just like our people, he's also from an NIT. And after his BTech in undergrad in NIT, undergrad in mechanical engineering from NIT Nagpur, he has done his masters in graphics, vision, and robotics from a French university, and now he's working as a research engineer at INRIA, France. So, like most of we people aspire to have a similar path. So, this talk will be around his journey, and like along with his undergrad and along with his masters, he has published a number of papers in most of the reputed journals, and also has several patents in his name. So, like, so he'll be talking about his journey, and if you people have any questions, we will have some interactions after end of his talk. So you can note down your questions and put them in chat. And first of all, he'll just share his journey through some slides. So over to you, sir.
Okay, great. Thanks for the great introduction. And also thanks a lot for inviting me here. This is one of my first guest lecture or talks. Uh, so, so like consider me as like just your senior, not like a professor or some very big guy or something that. So I'm just gonna be very frank with you and like the way we had in the colleges. So can you see my screen?
Yes, sir, it's visible.
Okay. So as Bhuvan requested me, I sort of arranged my presentation according to about the career in robotics and AI research, and yeah, let's dive in. So uh, is it okay like if I speak like a bit Hindi and bit English, like, or some people do not understand?
I think that partial Hindi and partial English will be.
Okay, because I feel like adding sometimes adding some Hindi words makes
Yes,
up
sir,
the whole thing
that will work.
better understandable. Yeah. So, quick overview about myself. So, as Bhuvan told me, I was graduated from VNIT, NIT Nagpur from 2016. I did my bachelor's in mechanical engineering from there, and then I moved on to do my master's from University of Grenoble, Alps. So, it's a university in Grenoble, and I did my master's in coordination with INRIA. Later, I joined INRIA as a research engineer. And INRIA is a French National Institute of Computer Science. It's one of the most premier institute for computer science in the world. So, and also I had multiple experiences with different internship at different locations. For example, at INRIA, IIT Bombay, High Tech Robotic Systems. For some time, I was at NTU and Institute of Infocom Research in Singapore. Also had some experience with leaderships, specifically with Ivy Labs. Ivy Labs is a robotics lab just like yours in NIT Nagpur. And 8boards was my venture for um, a COVID-related robot, and there's a new venture now I'm working on currently. It's Delis Robotics. So, table of content. I'm gonna go through all of these. So I'll start with my background about my VNIT, my life, about Ivy Labs research, different research internship that I did, how you can also get different internships, masters, research publication, and finally I end with entrepreneurship. So I will go through this, and then we'll try to connect these dots backward, like because we can only connect the dots backward, and you would see that some dots do not connect. For example, I don't know what the heck I did uh, in academics during my VNIT, and I still don't know how that was helpful to me in the future. So yeah, just another question is, are there any professors also in the talk? So
No, sir, it's
no.
students only.
Okay, fine. So, starting with the background, I started from a very small town called as Savner in Maharashtra. It's close to Nagpur, it's 40 kilometers from Nagpur. So I would say that in my childhood I was very underconfident, very shy kind of a kid. Um, like today coming here and giving a lecture or like a talk, I could not have imagined that I would be able to do such kind of a thing during my childhood. I was like very shy, but I was like very curious. I was tinkerer. I was always wanted to just open up some toy, fix it up or break it up. And I was like, I would say more of a like a jugadu kind of person. And also many things helped me. For example, my parents, we had a printing press, a small printing press, not a big shop, a small printing press, but had enough supplies of cardboards, papers, paper clips, and like all things for crafts. So I was always from the beginning making some other thing like periscopes or kaleidoscopes or different things. Then after I did my schooling in Saunir, in very small school. Then I went to Nagpur for studying for my IIT JEE, and for that it was a big struggle. I had to fight my parents because my parents are not very educated. Um, so they have in our society or in our like caste or religion. What do we say? Family. Nobody ever went for higher studies. Most of the all of them had this concept that okay, after the after you grow up, you would take up the shop of your father, do the bartan ki dukaan या फिर kapde ki dukaan, something like that. But nobody ever went to sort of like a city and do formal education and higher studies like that. So I was the first one, at least from my family, to do a higher education. Then I fought my parents, went to Nagpur, studied very hard, very hard, and still I sucked at IIT. Um, and I think this I am telling you because I think this is the story of many of us. Many of us has worked very hard, and at at JE exam we somehow did not do the best of us. So um, yeah, I would like to tell you about a story, a small story. I call it the thumb rule story for the success in life, sort of. So it's just after my ITJ exam, I got to know that my nani, she had died, and then I had to go to Bhopal urgently. And then I was in the train. I booked a ticket, and I was this RAC seat होता है ना जो साइड में होता है जिसमें दो लोग को शेयर करना पड़ता है. So I shared a seat with with a soldier. He was on there, and I was like complete crying because I really fucked up my IIT paper, and was like I was feeling like okay, I have uh, completely ruined my life. And then he told me this kind of a thumb rule story, and he said that the thumb rule for a success is that there's no thumb rule. So it doesn't, if you have not been to an IIT, it doesn't mean that you cannot be successful. So there are many people who say that, oh, you have to do this thing, you have to do that thing to get successful, but it's not at all true. Like there's no like one thumb rule to the success in life, and there has been many exceptions, and people have become successful from different walks of their life using different paths they have followed. So never think that if you are not able to get something, achieve something, that you will not be successful in the future. So yeah, next, moving on to undergrad at VNIT. So I thought that VNIT would be something like this. Would we have a big uh, um, big lecture halls? We'll do a lot of robotics, make this and this. These are all IIT Bombay things. It was not at all like this. Not at all. There was nothing in NIT Nagpur. Or I thought that it would be something like this. I would be sitting on a stairs, playing guitars, having a lot of friends, and this and that. I am telling you, it was also not like that. What it was like was that I found out that the curriculum, uh, the curriculum at VNIT was like really old, and most of the studies was pointer based and exam focused, and so do the students were the same. most of the students were like, oh, we have to work for exams, have to study, and they would not do anything else, not do any other extracurricular activities. Most that when I entered VNIT, I was accepted for as a computer science, for a branch of computer science. And when you go for admission, you have a something called as internal shifting. So in that, if you want to shift to another branch, you could put in the branch name, and then they would internally shift you if there are seats vacant. And I don't know what happened. In the beginning, I was like, oh, I have to take computer science because I want to get a good job and this and that. Later, when I went for admission, suddenly my inner voice came in and said that no, like Anshul, you're not very good at mathematics. But you're good. You love physics. Mechanical equal physics. Computer science equal maths. Uh, maybe you should take mechanical and go for your heart. And I took mechanical. And later I realized that, oh fuck, what I did. It's like I realized that mechanical engineering was not at all that I was interested in. But good thing that happened was that because I went to mechanical engineering, I met few seniors, like specifically naming Rohan Thakkar, and then another guy was Ajinkya Kamath. He was from electrical, but he would always hang out with Rohan. So Rohan was these two guys were like really inspiration for me. And Rohan was really talented guy. Even Ajinkya, he went on to do masters in internship in CMU, then masters in CMU, and then he got he's now a research engineer at JPL NASA, and now doing a PhD at Caltech. So Rohan had been a great inspiration for not just for us, but all of my entire team. And what I started to do, why I was telling this, that what was my journey at NIT Nagpur was that because many times this happens that you end up in a situations which you have not expected it. Um, so you have two options: either you can just keep crying, or you can find out what good I can do in this current situation. So I found out few good seniors. I found out good. Colleagues like who were interested, who were really passionate. And then we started something called as Ivy Labs. So before we had an IEEE students branch, um, it was more for taking the workshops and some electronics and electrical things, barely functioning. But I had this thing that in mind that no, we have to, if there's no robotics in there, we have to develop it. So Rohan was there, Ajinkya was there, and all the colleagues that I found, it was an all-star team. Most of them went to a big universities, are doing PhD now in robotics. So we transform IEEE students branch into Ivy Labs. So Ivy Labs is basically a short for Innovation Labs. So we had this initial logo. It's a robot which is holding Ivy Labs. So it means that the robotics is something that brings us all together. So, but it was very cartoonish, and we are now changing this logo. So in the beginning, we even did not had our proper space to sit. So we all started with our dorm rooms from our hostels. Then slowly moving on to small room that we found from one of the professor, and then finally have our own space. Currently, Ivy Labs, um, it has more than 100 members and more than 50 plus alumni, and many of the alumni have reached very good locations, like some of the, for example, I already told you about Rohan, NASA, Carnegie Mellon, some of math work, Mila, Penn State, Oregon, all sorts of big universities all across the world. So how did we go from just being like literally no robotics, no research, no understanding about the world, to be so good? Um, yeah. Okay. Yeah, the slide is there. Fine. So I'm gonna try to answer this, like how did we do this thing, in next few slides. So just have a given account. We publish in at Ivy Labs. We until in past 6 to 7 years. So it started around in 2013. From 2013, in 7 years, we published 20 plus research papers. We participated in 10 plus conferences, 5 plus patent, and 7 plus posters. And these research papers are not research papers by alumni. So these are the works actually done by the students, by us when we were at VNIT in the 4 years, during the 4 years of work. So so don't think that this is like I'm kind of a bragging and everything like this. I'm just telling these things because I want to tell you that what kind of possibilities you have in the future. So I'm trying to give you a more kind of an exposure, what kind of a dreams and targets you can keep for your upcoming future. How did we do that thing? Okay, again, we have some more projects. Yeah, we started with almost nothing. Then we started making robots like autonomous stair climber. This robot actually uses AI to detect deep learning to detect the stairs, and then it calculates heights of the stairs, and accordingly it aligns it to the stair and then climbs on the stair. And there was another robot which recently the juniors made. It was using propellers to drive the robot. Then there was this Recubus. This is our latest project at Ivy Labs, where it's a snake robot that transforms in that two snake robots join together to make a quadcopter, and then quadcopter try to walk. No, sorry, not quadcopter, quadruped, and it tries to walk. So, then there were another projects like autonomous RC cars and this Sahayak robot with 8 bots. That was our latest venture for assisting doctors and nurses in the hospitals who are treating coronavirus patients. Quickly to name few other robots. These were some past robots. So there was this prosthetic hand, butler bot. Right. So prosthetic hand, butler bot. Then we also worked upon some humanoid robot, and we also went to some competitions with humanoid robot. We worked with um, um, some startups, logistic startups, and then we worked with them on a drone delivery system. Then there was this another project that Rohan and Achinkya did, was on Snake Robot, that got very popular, very famous, was appeared in IEEE Spectrum. And this was Osmos, that was an omnidirectional snake robot that was my final year thesis. Yeah. So how did we do that thing? Here is that slide that I was saying from so long. Okay. So I think how we so if I try to, it's a very complicated how we did this thing, uh, but maybe if I have to coin some few words, then I would say it was perseverance. That was, of course, there was like a real hard work done by uh, all the students at Ivy Labs, and all my seniors and juniors. Was real hard work done by them. And then there was another thing, not giving up to the system. So for every single thing, every rupee that we have to get to make the project, we had to fight the system. We had to fight the professors. They were not ready to fund any of our projects. Initially, we put a lot of money from our own pocket. We started taking workshops and then get some money from the subscriptions of these workshops. And then as we started publishing the papers, slowly, professors bent. They gave us space, they gave us more funding, and then we did more work. And then we did not give up to the system. And also another thing was many of the students, they just give up, that they just do the studies and become only pointer focused, and do not focus on their projects. So and our system forces us to do that thing. So we try to maintain the balance between pointer and between the projects. So I'm not saying that pointer is not important, but pointer is very important. But side by side, our projects are also important. And another thing that really helped us, I think, was the mentorship model that we used. And so, this is something that I think maybe you also have this thing in your lab, or if you're not, you should also try this model. So idea is that a senior would mentor a junior, or alums would mentor the juniors. So uh, hard work and perseverance are really important, but one important aspect for success is also right kind of an exposure. You might be doing a lot of hard work, but if you don't have a right exposure in which direction I should do a hard work, then you would not be very successful. That's that I particularly feel. And this kind of a right exposure, it came with involvement of seniors and alums. So as I asked you, if are there any alums today in the meeting, because we also have many like guest lectures and sessions, and most of the alums, they join in such kind of a guest lectures, and even sometimes professors also join. So uh, it's actually alums who are inviting the professors or postdocs or PhD that they work with to give a guest lecture um, in at Ivy Labs. So um, so so this alums really helped us to get a good right exposure. And this right exposure helped us to get internships and masters. And when we do a good internship and we did a good masters, we give it back to the students and give them a better exposure. So it was like a, a cycle. So once you are inside this cycle, you keep growing, keep growing. So once one of the senior has a good internship and master, it gives the right exposure to the juniors, and then the juniors do good, and then they give right exposure to their juniors, and they good this cycle. Usually, what I have found that this is also cycle, and there's also a problem of chicken and egg. If you don't have a good internship and masters, then you cannot give a right exposure to your juniors. So you have to those who can get into this cycle is good. Some people could not break into this cycle. uh, like I have seen, for example, in IITs, uh, so many people were able to so they are so successful because of this mentorship model. That I personally feel that in IITs than NITs. So okay, uh, now it's over with the Ivy Labs. Now we'll move with my projects and my internships and what I did and how was my journey through the robotics path. So I also started robotics in second year with very some small humble beginnings. Started with simple Arduino based projects like line followers, some assistive devices for blind person like blind navigator, assistive glove, and some remote control robots. We call it as butler robot over here. But then what really helped was going to an internship. So I got an internship at second year at IIT Bombay. In so I was actually partly doing at UMIC lab, and partly I was at MEMS lab, micro electromechanical systems lab in mechanical department. So my core project was the leech robot, and some of my other friends, like so we Akash, Manish, and Abhinav, they were focusing on the snake robots. So this leech robot was sort of an idea of Professor Prasanna Gandhi. It was like to climb the stairs or climb down the stairs. So there are two different modules which are connected uh, through a flexible link, and then we have some magnets down, and then some very high friction uh, material that he was working on. So idea was that the one module would pull it up and then put it other, and then pull it back or reverse. So there were little flaws in this that we were working on. This was just like a research project. So my part was to design the entire box, whole mechanical system, mechanical assembly, the circuitry and everything. So there was a lot of things that I learned during the IIT Bombay internship. And then on the other hand, Akash, Manish, and Bhinav were working on snake robot that can do different kind of snake motions, can climb onto the trees like that. It did not climb really, but it was our goal. So but I worked on these leech robot was thing, but importantly, I also saw over there like what I was seeing. What was the difference between an NIT and an IIT, like what we do and how we approach a particular problem, and how an IITians approach a particular problem, and why they are so successful. And I spend a lot of time there observing and understanding what they are doing and what are different projects they are working on. For example, in UMIC lab itself, they were working on autonomous vehicles, which was one was a challenge by Mahindra, and then there was another autonomous vehicle competition, AGVC, which happens in US, and they used to participate in that competition from every year, and they have won us many number of prizes in that competition. And that was like a first time of an experience and understanding that um, really, oh, this kind of things are possible. Going abroad is possible. Going abroad for um, doing some competitions are possible. Then there was this another thing they were working on with the F1 Formula racing car, and it was also, if you see closely over here, they are sponsored by so many companies and so many big companies. And in NIT Nagpur, we were like literally struggling for even 5,000 rupees, 10,000 rupees to uh, get our projects going. So this was a kind of a big exposure that I got over there, and it opened up my mind. So I would say I came back from IIT Bombay internship 3 months. It was just 3.5 months internship, and then so it was after second year. Now I am in the third year, and in third year um, we gathered some money, and then we worked upon a 20 degree of a humanoid robot, and this was our like a key project. So it was very costly. It costed us around 5 to 6 lakh rupees. um, was funded by the VNIT, and some portion we funded by our own pocket. So it was to design a humanoid robot completely from the scratch. So we just only bought the motors here, and rest all the thing, the designing, assembling, fabrication using CNC milling and everything, fabricating, we did everything by our own. Even the circuit designing, we moved on from Arduinos to design our own custom circuits with a very precise with very SMD components and lots of different drivers and controllers in that together. And so this was another good project that we worked on. So next I went to after my third year in the after my third year in the 3 months of vacation, I went to Singapore for another internship. This internship I really got, I would say it's because of my exposure that I got at IIT Bombay. I did not work on any of these things like autonomous vehicles or Formula racing cars, but because I spent some time over there, and it 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 sort of maybe subconsciously or um, put up in my mind that, oh, I have to work upon autonomous vehicle. Oh, it's so cool. Autonomous vehicles are so cool. And I kept searching for the professors working in this autonomous vehicle domain, and finally I got a luck, and then a lottery, and I went to Singapore for an internship. So this internship was actually with the institute called as Institute of Infocom Research. So in short, it's called as I2R, and it was basically situated inside NTU campus. So we had in NTU, so they were yet to get their this institute I2R was yet to get their official campus. It was a location called as Fusionopolis, uh, and the new campus was about to be inaugurated by the president of Singapore, and they had this idea that, okay, they're gonna make a autonomous vehicle, and in that autonomous, so they're gonna bring the president of Singapore from his house to the Fusionopolis area in an autonomous vehicle, and inaugurate the whole new big building. So and they got like Singapore is like really lot of money over there, and they got about $4 million of funding to do this kind of a pilot project. And this project was in association with NTU. So we were working on developing. So a car. This was the car at the bottom. Toyota. It was from Toyota. Uh, to get the president of Singapore from his house to Fusionopolis. And then there was the other two vehicles that we were working, Toyota Comps, we say. So these were the small vehicles to be deployed in the airport, Changi Airport in Singapore, to be made completely autonomous. So it was a really, really good experience for me. And what I worked on over there, so I started with the LiDAR and camera, like sensor fusion thingy. So first was like calibration between LiDAR and camera, and then I used extended Kalman filter for localization of our vehicles. So I was using GPS, wheel odometry, IMU to localize the vehicle. So here, maybe in case in the, so this thing is a map of the small road that was given to us inside the NTU campus to do the testing. And then the red thing is the uh, output of my localization. So you can see it localizes the vehicle very accurately. Then I also worked upon road detection. So this was using multi-layer perceptron network. So that time, convolution neural networks and deep learning was yet to be become popular. They were, I think, convolutional networks were not even really even released. So I had to use with the multi-layer perceptrons with that. So it was like at very early stage in 2000. This was in 2000 what 14. I worked on deep AI and computer vision kind of thing, deep learning already. I was working on deep learning already in 2014. This was road detection, and then there was uh, road curb detection. So it's the edges of the road that we have to detect so that we can find out what is the navigable area. So the area between these two curves would be the navigable area for autonomous vehicle. So this was the 3 months of work over there. Did a lot of work, did a lot of traveling, a lot of good uh, exposure over there also. Then I came back and for the final year thesis, yeah, this was our final year, and then we wanted to work upon something that could give us a research paper um, and would really help us um, in future for getting masters in things. So Akash, as I said, Akash, when I went to Singapore, Akash and Manish, they went to CMU and they worked with Professor Hovic Josset in Snake Report. So they got the internship in CMU. CMU is Carnegie Mellon University, which is one of the best, it's the best of the best university in the world for robotics. So Akash and Manish went to CMU to work on Snake Robots because they were working before on Snake Robot at IIT Bombay. And I went to Singapore because I was in autonomous vehicle, because I was very curious in autonomous vehicle, and I had spent a lot of time uh, discussing about autonomous vehicle with the students at IIT Bombay. Uh, then when we came back and we were thinking on what we should work upon. There was autonomous vehicle or there was snake robots that we should go. Finally, we concluded that okay, autonomous vehicles are a bit too hard, a lot of money, and then we'll go with the snake robots. So we worked upon a snake robot, which we actually whole idea was to have a three sort of a modular balls which are omnidirectional and they can move in any direction, and then connect them mechanically and also softwarely linked so that they can coordinate with each other. More or less, I would say like a swarm robotics. So I'll show you a video quick. So this was our first paper that we published. So it could go straight, and then it can turn sideways. Can do this turn in place motion, circular motion, yeah. and many other different types of gates we tried with the robot. Okay. Any questions until now? Or we do it maybe after?
Sure, sir. We can like take the questions at the end of session.
Okay. So is everybody able to follow up, like, or is it too fast or slow?
I think it's perfect, sir. The journey is very relatable to us, so we can
Okay.
follow it.
Okay.
It's really good going. You can continue.
Yeah, another internship. So I did a lot of internships, I told you. So this was another internship, and maybe one of the best internships of me. So this internship was at INRIA in France. So this was an internship after my graduation. So at Ivy Labs, like, we sort of have this kind of a concept that most of them, you see in the images, our team, we do not appear for placements. We know that the placements are already shitty. It's wastage of time to appear for the placements, and we never had this kind of a or maybe we are mm, molded. I would say molded is the right word, in a way that we were not craving for jobs just right after our graduation. So we all were looking for some sort of an internship. Most of them went for an internship, or if they went for a job also, they went for a job where they could do a research work more. And then most of them went for masters and PhD. So so we never given to the system thing that we have to appear for jobs, and we didn't wasted our time for pursuing jobs. That was the case for, at least for me and many other Ivy Labs members. Some was constrained by financially to do the jobs, but most of them, I think, we can give us some slack and not given for a jobs and go for to cool research. So yeah, so after graduation, I decided to do another internship. I was very lucky, like extremely lucky to get an internship at INRIA, and we had a great team over there. So I worked at Team Chroma, which was specialized for autonomous vehicle. You see, like, so this internship I got because of the internship at Singapore. Singapore internship I got because of the internship at IIT Bombay. So everything, if you try, trying to connect the dots backward. That's how it all like moved further. So at INRIA, so it was 6 months internship. I worked on ground estimation and point cloud segmentation. So does everybody know what's the LiDAR is and what is the point cloud?
So second year people know that because we just had classes over roads. So
Okay.
we were teaching them navigation stack, so they know that. But first year, I'm not assuming. So
Okay.
they do not. You can give a brief idea, very brief.
Okay, great. So autonomous. So yeah, with autonomous vehicles, um, what so so the vehicle need to navigate autonomously in an environment. So first thing is the perception. Right? So how when you try to drive a car, what the first thing that you do is to perceive the environment around you, like see what's, if there's a car, if there's an is a pedestrian, if there's a road, or where is the traffic light and whatnot. So the first step in any autonomous navigation autonomous vehicle is perception. Once the perception is done, then you take a decisions, and then after the decision is done, then you give a control and commands to the vehicle to navigate accordingly. So that's like a very shortly a pipeline how it works. So for the perception, what we do is, like, we put a number of sensors on autonomous vehicles, and one of such sensors is a LiDAR. Another popular sensor is camera. We put lots of cameras on the car, and we also put lots of LiDARs. So LiDARs are basically, I would say they are laser scanners. So this is a huge laser scanner. So what happens is that it emits a laser, it goes in the environment, it hits at some object, and it comes back. So, and this LiDAR records what is the amount of time it took the laser to go hit something and come back. And according to that, timing, it calculates if there is some object or something that's there in the environment and at what distance it is. So LiDARs are like very popular in autonomous vehicle because they generate like a really high quality data, lots of data. So every laser that go in the environment and hit something and come back generate 1 point. So and there are like for example in this Velodyne there are 64 lasers. These 64 lasers are firing at the same time and they're hitting 64 different points in the space, and then they are coming back. And what happens is that then we rotate this LiDAR also 360-degree continuously. So we are having a ray of lasers going, hitting objects and coming back, and then we are also rotating it 360-degree. So we get this a whole big 360-degree points that tells us basically the occupancies in the space, in the 3D space. So and we call it as a point cloud. So a huge. So I worked upon. First thing was ground estimation and point cloud segmentation. So what's ground estimation is that whenever a vehicle need to navigate, it needs to understand where is the ground, where is the hills, where are the slopes, where are the maybe a non-navigable area, maybe where are the objects. So idea was that to segment this point cloud into two categories. First was a ground points, and then there was the obstacle points. So once we know what are the obstacle points and what are the ground points, now we can quickly make something like a occupancy grid. We project them everything on the ground on the 2D. We can make an occupancy grid like this. So here the green represents the navigable area, the area which is um, which is which is free. Blue represents the areas which are like occupied, means by some sort of an obstacle, and then the areas in the red represent that these are like unknown areas. We don't know what there is because we only have information till this area and we cannot see beyond this particular object. So these are the reds are the unknown area, greens are the navigable, and the blues are the obstacles. So thing was to use ground estimator to estimate the ground, then segment the point cloud, and then make an occupancy grid so that a vehicle can navigate in the real environment. So for this, I use something called as Markov random field or conditional random field, and use spatio-temporal filtering. I would not go into detail, but just to give a quick info, it's like I divide the entire world into a grid, into small cell, and then for each cell I am trying to find out what's the height of that cell. So if the height is below certain threshold, then it's ground. If the height is below certain above certain threshold, then it's an object. So sort of like that. Yeah. And then it was 6 months of internship. It was a lot of work I did over there. I even published a paper on this work in International Vehicle Symposium. It was a good paper. Has a not too many citations, but at least 15 to 16 citations now. And I also traveled a lot, like really lot in the 6 months. I saved all the money that I had got for the stipend. I was living bare bone, like literally a bachelor's in a very small room, but I saved a lot of money and then used that money to travel across the lot of places. Like I went to Nice, Paris, Lyon, Grenoble, Marseille, Rotterdam, Amsterdam, Florence, Rome, Pisa. I won't show the images. You can go to my Facebook or Instagram and then see it maybe. Yeah. Then I came back from France, another internship, High-Tech Robotic Systems in Gurgaon. They are also working very good in autonomous vehicles. So I was working with dynamic object detection there with the point clouds. Okay, no more, fine. So to summarize everything quickly. So after second year, IIT Bombay. After third year, I2R. After fourth year, I did 2 internships at INRIA and High-Tech Robotic Systems. So total 4 internships. And so just ask, so why you should do a research internship. So first thing, I feel like you can do it like a normal industry internship versus a research internship. What's the difference and why you should do a research internship rather than a industry internship? According to me, is that when you do an research internship, you have like a sort of an accelerated learning, and because you work upon a challenging problems. When you go to an industry, most of the time they are hiring you as an intern to offload their work to some person. So you are given some menial jobs or menial tasks to work upon many a time. But in research internship, you are supposed to uh, do research and come up with the new ideas, original ideas, and something new. Also, another thing that with the research internships, usually we have a focus in a mind to publish a research paper. Why publish a research paper is because it gives us credibility to our work. For example, you could do a lot of different projects like this and that and those, and you can write a lot of things in your resume. How does a professor or somebody know that you are not lying, or you really have a capability, or you just like जैसे वो होता है ना कि हवे में बातें कर रहे हैं, so you're not doing the talking in the air. It gives us credibility. But if you have a research paper, it gives us a credibility to your work. Then a professor know, okay, this is the conference. If the work that you have done is published in this kind of a conference, it means the work you have done is a good and it's credible. It's been reviewed by a level at an international standard. So research internship help in that. Secondly, uh, it gives you recommendation letter from a profs, which is very valuable. So when you go and apply for a master's in future, uh, when you're applying for some big university, there's big professors in abroad. They know each other. We have a robotics has a very small community, or AI has a small community. Every professor know each other, and when you apply for a master's, this admission committee knows, oh, this guy did an internship at this professor and he has a recommendation from this professor. So they have a slight uh, like bias for you, and then good recommendation letter can get you a good master's. Overall, it's a very good exposure to do a research internship, and most importantly, it helps you a lot in getting a master's. Okay, a lot of talking. Then next, um, I'm what's the time? It's already 1 hour almost. I'll try to do quick. Okay.
No, sir, it's okay. You can take a rest if you want to.
No, I
We
mean,
are really enjoying the talk.
okay. So if you're enjoying the talk, then I'll go at the same pace.
Sure.
If it's getting boring, so interesting things are coming in front. I'll talk about more about how to apply for master's application and how far. So preparation for research internship. So I thought like this would be a good thing to include. So usually to get a research internship, one good way is the official way. It's like if you have a very good grades, then you can go to like SMBOs, MyTax, Campus France, RISS, TAD, a plethora of the opportunities if you have a good grades. But for people like me, who was stuck in mechanical engineering and was not at all interested in mechanical engineering, and my pointer was like really, I mean not very low, but okay, really low. It was 7.2, and at times my ranking in my class of 100 was about from 100 I was ranked around 60, 65. So that was so poor ranking, like if you see. And sometimes I felt like, oh, what a shitty thing I'm doing, like how could I rank 60 out of 100 people. That was very poor. But if I see now, like after 6 years, um, uh, like all my peers in my batch in mechanical engineering, what they are doing and where I am standing right now, even though I was ranked 60, I would say that I had a much better life, or much better, I have achieved much more than those who had a 9 pointer, or were very good at studies at that time. I'm not saying that you should not have a good pointer. It was just that I was not able to cope up. That was my deficiency. But at Ivy Labs now we are like focusing people to focus on their pointer, because for masters pointers are really important. So if in case you don't have a good grades, good pointer, what's the way to get a research internship? I think so I use this thing, backdoor. So you can get a backdoor. It's like you can go for unpaid internships. Many times if you apply, email to a professor and say that okay, you are ready to come to their university unpaid, and then you will manage everything. Many times professors agree. They are more likely to agree because they don't have to manage the funds for you. And if you do not do good work in their internship, professor have to not waste his money on you. So usually professors more inclined towards giving for unpaid internship. So luckily I did not have to go to any unpaid internship. All my internships were paid. Some were like, at least there was like a uh, minimum sort of a stipend I got. But then you can also use some recommendation from profs. Like some professors have connections with the professors abroad or alums. So right now, for example, I'm at Indria, so I now have helped some people to get internships. Rohan is at JPL, so he has helped many of us to get internship at JPL. And also you can now, and then in this case, you have to leverage your projects, all the projects that you have done in your bachelor's, you have to put them forward, like put them on steroids, like write your resumes properly, and then uh, make it very attractive. So this is like a very tough thing, but yeah, this was one way to do it. Uh, then for a quick tips for resume and cover letter is like, well, so at Inria now I get a multiple applications for internships. So all of these, many students send applications to my professor and he forwards it to me to check. Okay, check if this guy is genuine or not. So what I do usually, I check is that I check which college they are, which what grades they are, have they done a relevant projects. So according to the work that we are doing at our team, so I would suggest to have multiple resumes, maybe not 5 6 but at least 2 or 3, depending upon the domain that you want to apply, so that you can highlight that particular projects more, write more about those particular projects and less about the other projects. And there's this thing going on, like resume should be just one page. I personally feel that you can go beyond one page. If you check my resume, it's 3 pages. Um, Sometimes it might go to 4 pages also. I don't know. In future. So like at least for the research area, when some students sent an resume to me, I want to know everything what that student has done from that resume, from just one file. I don't want to click on different links and links, or maybe uh, search about him, this and that. I want to understand very clearly what he has done and is he capable uh, to contribute in our team or not. So going beyond the one pages and clearly writing the everything in resume is, I think, a good idea. At least I would say this is true for the research internships and anything in the research. Maybe for industrial internships, or when you apply for jobs in an industry, you might want to go with just one page. But research internships, you can have more than one page. Cover letter and motivation letter. First thing, don't write don't write respected sir or ma'am. This is like a very uh, like thing that every Indian does, is like start their motivation letter or cover letter with respected sir, respected ma'am. Usually in abroad, we never say this respected work, respected. You can just start the motivation letter, hello. For example, my professor name is Christian. Hello, Christian. Hello, Professor Christian. Like that. Start with a hello is a good idea. Or not dear. You cannot use dear, but I think hello is a good idea. Or that hello is a good idea. Just start with hello, normal hello. Then you, some many of us do a mistake that we just make one cover letter and then just spam to all the professors. But what I usually do is that have a template of a cover letter or motivation letter, and then there will be a one section, one column, where I would change it for every professor that I send. So this column is basically, it mentions about the research that professor has done. Like you say that, okay, I have read your research, I have read your this research paper, that research paper, and I really liked it, and I would like to extend your work in this way. And that really is important, because that tells the professor that the student has really worked and did at least some research about his work. So that's important. Then, okay, this slide is, I haven't finished this slide, but quickly I'm going to tell it. So one another difficulty is how to find the profs. It's like first, so quickly saying that you can first define your domain, then start reading some popular research papers in that particular domain, and try to see the video tutorials, maybe from MIT, Stanford, different places, and then see what are professors who appears in those tutorials, what are the works they have done, what are the papers they have published. Go through their papers and go check what papers they have cited and what laboratories they come from, and then try checking the websites of those laboratories. Try checking what are the different PhD students, what are different postdocs, who are different professors. So usually you can check their Google Scholar Index. Okay, oops. Google Scholar Index to know if the professor has done good research or not. Many times professors in big labs, big universities don't reply. So you have to email postdocs. If postdocs don't reply, then you have to email a PhD. So professors are very busy, so you apply postdoc. If not postdoc, then you apply to a PhD. Mostly PhDs will answer you. And then another tip is to start as early as possible. If you want to do a summer internship, then you have to start applying for internship in November, a year before in November, and try to mail professors early in the morning so that your mail is first in their inbox when they open their mail in the morning. So quick tip. Okay. Yeah, gonna take 1 minute rest here. And yeah, maybe I would read this line, everybody, and be really read it and understand it by heart. Okay, so I told you that before that there's no thumb rule for a success, but okay, we don't know how to reach success, but we can model success somehow. We can make a approximately model success. So this is one kind of an approximate model that I have found for a success. So this is just one model. There could be another models for success. So this one is actually, I found it on Quora. So I was reading about success in dating, like relationship. So there was this one guy who said that, oh, like in the dating, if you want to have a success, there's this good formula, is that the success is equal to luck plus real value into projected value. So if you, this is like, and I felt it like really that this is what is important. And I have used this formula a lot of time. So I'm trying to I'll try to explain it. So let's explain this in terms of an internship, of getting an internship. So if you follow all the tips that I have told you over here, and all the other tips that you have seen on the internet, I would say you try to apply professor and you would still not get a single positive reply. Sometimes you have to email so many professors. For example, I email around 150 professors to get an internship at Singapore, to get an internship at INRIA. So basically, so it really depends upon luck. The success depends upon luck, but the luck you can counter by doing multiple applications. So if you do a 2 or 3 applications, and if, let's say, if your probability of your luck is just 0.01%, your luck is so if you just apply for three places, then you would not get accepted. So you have to, if it's 0.01, you have to apply for at least 100 locations to get one positive response. So luck you can counter by increasing number of application, increasing number of tries. Then success is also dependent upon real value into projected value. Now you see that here there is a multiplication, and here is addition. So multiplication here, it signifies that that these two are very connected. So real value and projected value. What does this mean? The real value is the real sort of work that you have done, like your real projects. Like तुम्हें कितना knowledge है, तुम्हें कितना आता है, तुमने that is your real value. But for example, if you know a lot of things, but you cannot project it properly, you cannot write it what you have done properly into a resume, cannot write properly what you have done into your motivation letter, then what happens is that the overall value of this bracket is reduced. So for example, let's say you are very good, you have done a very cool projects, very good research. So your real value, let's say, is 1, but you don't know how to project yourself, how to present yourself. So let's say projected value is, let's say your projected value is 0.1. So 1 into 0.1 becomes 0.1. So you see that the overall thing get reduced. So you need to have a balance between both real value and projected value. On the other hand, let's say you have not done any good projects, you don't have good pointers, you have not done any work, but you just write a lot, you just know how to write it in the resume, in SOPs, so you can project yourself very well. But overall, what will happen, let's say your projected value is 1 and then your real value is 0, then overall this bracket becomes 0. So you need to have balance between real value, and you must know how to project it properly. So this applies very good in dating, also applies very good in internship, masters, and any other sort of ventures or anything that in the future. Okay. I don't have slide number, sorry. Now moving on to the master's application. So we are almost at the near the end, or just a few more slides left. So I did internships, and after that, after fifth year, in the fifth year, I went for masters in University of Grenoble Alpes. So asking some questions that usually students ask me, like many of my juniors ask me, is for example, should I do a master's, like, or should I just take a job in India? So this is like a biggest question that everybody has when they are in their bachelor's. At least at some point of time, everybody gets this question: should I do a master? According to me, like, yes, answer is yes. So if you have not given up already on the learning, then you should definitely do a master's, because bachelor's, I personally felt, it's my personal opinion, that I personally feel that the bachelor's is not enough at all. Like, the world is moving very fast. There is a lot of technological advancements, and what you learn in your bachelor's, it doesn't prepare you enough for to deal with this challenging world. So masters, I personally feel, in the field like robotics and AI, which is so fast moving, maybe not in mechanical engineering or other field, but robotics and AI, masters can be is a really good. Another good big reason is that you get a better job opportunities after your masters, better salaries. Then also masters opens up a whole new possibilities of world. You can do PhD post beyond that. You can go to different countries from after your masters for a jobs, and people trust you more. The interviewers trust you more that, okay, you have a master's, so you are a credible person. And another important thing that usually is not highlighted is that you learn to stand on your feet. When you actually go abroad, you have to deal with so many shitload of things that you don't have to go through when you are in India. You have to, like, go through the stress of finding the right application and then getting the right college, and finally going through visa process, loan process, and then booking the flights and your room, and then going there. If you go when you go there, there's no food. You have to cook your food by yourself. There are no maids, no koi naukar nahi hota, and you have to do everything by yourself. Every single thing you have to do by yourself. Many people cannot cope up with that, so much of pressure and so much of things, but who usually those who cope up with these kind of things, they end up being a much better person, with a much open mind, and more capable persons. So that was that. I think that's why one must do a master's after their bachelor's. Another question that many people ask is that should you do an MBA? So for people like so my answer would be like, I don't know, like maybe if you have no more engineer blood left in you, then go for an MBA. If there's a little bit of engineer left in you, then go for a master's. Okay. Okay. Another thing about, so from where should you do a master? This is another question that many people ask me. So one clear and cut answer is that wherever you can find the best opportunities in your field. So that's the only, I think, the very clear answer for that. Why you want to do a master's is that so that you can get a good jobs after that. You have more opportunities after your master's. So if you do a master's from some random country with a random college, then and you don't have opportunities there, it is worthless. So you should do your master's from where you can find the best opportunities. So I have divided where into three categories, like America, Europe, and India. So just quickly going through pros and cons with different places. I personally, after interacting with my friends, so many friends, and my experiences, I personally feel America has the best opportunities in almost every domain and every field, and higher salaries. They have a bigger community of Indians. They have a quality education, and more important thing that the Americans speak English, what we are very familiar with. So language is a big um, factor over here. With another thing in the Europe, I found out that the opportunities are average, though we feel like, oh, France, Germany, yeah, this, that, Netherlands, such a big names. Uh, like all the movies you see Paris, Rome, maybe. But in reality, I felt that for the technical jobs like robotics and AI and all those things, Europe is still lagging a lot behind America, and they were like very average opportunities, very average salaries, like maybe almost touching like the salaries that you get in India, like very average salaries. Also, there are very sparse communities, Indian communities. Here, for example, in France, at least, there was like very few Indian communities, no sort of Indian festivals or culture celebrated. Many people do not know anything about India and Indian cultures over here. Another big disadvantage of studying in Europe is the language, because all these European countries, they speak different language. For example, French speak France. France speak French. Spain speaks Spanish, Italy Italian, and you sort of have a notion, like understanding that, oh, these countries are very developed countries, and they are very well educated. It means they must know English. They must be good at English. But I'm telling you that they are horrible at English. Like in France, literally horrible. You go to a bank, you meet a bank manager, a very good financing guy, to a very poor guy. Nobody knows English. Rarely somebody could speak English, and then it becomes after some point, it becomes very difficult to make friends, to make real connections with the people that would help you climb the ladder in the industry. And so language was a big thing. Another thing I want to emphasize is that, and then just looking at India, is that it's not sorry, India. So India usually has less opportunities, low salaries, but we have a very good community. You might want to stay with your parents in the future. because most of them who goes to masters abroad, they usually stay at abroad because they have put so much efforts there. So if you have this family constraint that you want to stay in India, then maybe masters in India, why not? Maybe some people go to Europe and then come back to India. Um, I personally feel one factor between choosing between America and Europe is a high cost of education. Uh, we have this kind of a concept in the mind that if we go to abroad for masters, we have to pay a lot of money. Uh, I accept, yes, in some cases, for example, in America, we have to pay a lot of money. But in Europe, we have to pay like very low amount of money, like almost negligible. So my master's cost of Europe was less than my fees at NIT Nagpur. So it was like very low. And so I would say in when you are trying to choose between um, master and no master because of financial constraint, I would say don't choose no master, choose master in Europe. So if you have a money to pay for the high cost of education, go to America. If you don't have the money, then go to Europe. If you want to stay with your parents and want to only continue in India, um, or I mean you don't plan to move out of India, then do a master's maybe in India, or maybe do a master's in Europe and come back to India, because if you pay a high cost of education in America, then coming back to India would be difficult. And then there is a rest of worlds, which is all depends. For example, see there's Singapore, Hong Kong, Australia, New Zealand, and these countries are very specific, very good at specific things, bad at other specific things. For example, Singapore is good for technical things and finances. So if you want to do some maybe MBA or like job in finance, something, Singapore is a very best good location. But some another sector it is not so good. So it depends a lot. Okay. Uh, I think I covered almost everything about this one also. So master application and preparation, like how to do this thing. First is to decide your domain, what you want to pursue. It's like there are multiple masters opportunities. Like you could do masters in robotics, you could do in computer science, you could do in AI. There are specializations in computer vision, controls, or maybe more conventional electrical, mechanical, and all those things. Then it's about deciding the country that you want to go, and the big factors are cost of education. Many do not have financial conditions to go to America, so that could be a very big deciding factors. Then is opportunities, competence. Like sometimes some countries, for example, America has more opportunities, but the competition is also high. Europe has less opportunities, but the competition is also low. Then you have to decide your colleges accordingly based on the quality of education, and finally prepare your application for masters. Yeah, this is a like a rough timeline that we thought that we usually follow at Ivy Labs, and I found that this timeline really works. So I would also like tell you about this timeline is that, so what we suggest to our juniors is that in their third year and till during their bachelor's, like third year and final year, really focus on your own grades and projects that you can do at your robotics lab, and the internship that you can get. Like really only focus on these three aspects. Don't give in for GRE TOEFL right now. Okay, as soon as you leave your college, um, usually we suggest, I suggest, or my senior suggests me, and then I suggest to all my juniors is that don't start your masters right away. Like some people just finish up their education, bachelor's, and then just directly go for masters. I would say don't go for masters right away. Do a job or internship for a year. Like a like a uh, reason behind this thing is that the masters are like very specific. You don't want कि जैसा तुम लोगों ने बैचलर्स में जो जिस ढंग से पढ़ते हुए टाइम गुजारा है, वैसे ही सेम एग्जैक्टली तुम मास्टर्स में करो. When you go to master, you need to prepare yourself that okay, I am going to masters for this specific reason, to learn this specific thing, and I have to perform there. I cannot afford having low pointer there. and what I need to specifically learn and what is this importance that we kind of understand when we go for a job or internships. We kind of learn, oh, these things are more important in industry, that things are less important in industry. So when I go to masters, I should focus on these things so that it would help me get a better job in the industry later. So usually I suggest everybody to do a job or internship after your final year. And when you are doing this job or internship, you part time prepare your application for masters. So the ideal way, this is according to my timeline. There can be multiple different timelines, but this is one that I feel is the best one. Is that after your uh, bachelor's, you try to give GRE and TOEFL and IELTS till the September. Like, okay. Uh, so, sorry, somebody's mic is cracking, maybe. Okay. So ideal is that just right after your bachelor's, when you are already have this kind of a mentality of studying, uh, quickly after finishing your bachelor's, quickly focus on the GRE and TOEFL. Don't wait too much, because if you wait too much, then you lose this ability of studying. During a bachelor's, you have this kind of an ability to do कि तुम 2-4 घंटे बैठ के पढ़ सकते हो, एग्जाम दे सकते हो, तुम्हारा माइंडसेट उस ढंग से भी सेटअप है. तो keep with the pace, and after you finish your bachelor, start studying for GRE, TOEFL and IELTS, maybe depending upon which kind of a country you want to go, and then give an exam in September. September, because after that, in December, all the applications for masters they begin. सो सितंबर में जब तुम लोगों ने GRE दे चुके होते हो, उसके बाद तुम्हारे पास अक्टूबर, नवंबर, दिसंबर बचता है, 2-3 महीने बच जाते हैं. इस 2-3 महीने में यू शुड वर्क अपॉन योर रेज्यूमे, SOP, LOR, and gather LORs from the different professors. It can take months to get an LOR from a professor. So these are the time when you gather LOR, work upon your SOP and resume properly. Try to find out what are the different colleges are available, what are the different where should you apply, where should you not apply, and do all sorts of research. And then in December, you apply to US universities. In February around, there are usually European universities, deadlines are in February. Then finally in April, you get a final response. And then you have to make a decision in April and then go for masters in August. So if you see, starting from this is almost 1 year of a period from your bachelor's to starting of a master's. So this 1 year of a period you can spend either doing an internship under a professor, or maybe even if you're paid a very less amount of money, or maybe doing some job which doesn't require you to put too much of attention to it, like too much of effort in it, so that you can part-time work upon this whole process over here. Okay, masters in robotics and CV. Yeah, same like VNIT. I thought when I go to masters, I would be again playing some guitar over there on the table, or maybe I will be having crazy all-night parties and working on crazy robots. It was not at all like that. It was not that. Most of them in the big universities, they don't go for parties. They don't play guitar over there. They don't really go for playing guitar in masters. We focus much more on the studies in masters. Yeah. Okay. I think we are left with only first few slides. I'm gonna get a water quickly, and I'll also give some rest to you guys.
Sure, sir.
Okay. But is it getting too long? I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
It's interesting, sir.
Okay. So let me see how many.
You can take a rest and then we can begin.
Okay. So I have a few slides, maybe 10 slides, but I will go through them very quickly. These are more technical slides, so I will not go to them.
So I will see it's like what are you doing presently, right? The rest
Yeah.
of the slides.
Rest of the slides are what I do presently. So I'm gonna get a water quickly. You guys
Sure,
also
sir.
take a water and then
Sure.
finish this thing.
So, as I noticed, like couple of people were raising hands during the talk. So we will give some time, like end of the talk, we will give some time and you can ask your question. Okay. Sir, you need to like unmute yourself.
Okay. I promise I'll go very fast now. It's too long. Uh, just few more things to tell about my experience, which will take little time, and after that, we'll go through what I do very fast. Um, about my masters. So I went for masters in France, as I told you before. Despite knowing that the America has the best opportunities over there, um, multiple reasons. First, shit happens. Uh, I got into some troubles, like the girl troubles, and then decided that I need to get out of India as soon as possible, and to get me out of my depression and then heartbreak and all sort of things. And then I found out, okay, this masters in France, all the other deadlines was already gone, and the one in the France was still left. And my professor, he was insisting me that to come back to France and start a masters here, and we can have a collaboration with Indria. So I said, okay, why not? Let's do it. So I, without knowing anything, I just went to France, and also I didn't had a right exposure because uh, before me there was only one batch, like batch of Rohan, who went to masters in CMU in America, and nobody else knew anything about doing masters in Europe, like what kind of issues we have here and what kind of opportunities we have here. So I would say I was the first one um, among my community to go to masters in Europe, and so it was sort of a mixed kind of feelings. Mixed feeling, why? Because firstly, it was just 1 year of a master, out of which 6 months was classes and 6 months was thesis and internship. So just 6 months I have to sit in the classes. So it was very cheap. I told you it's cheaper than the what I pay for at NIT Nagpur. Another thing was that I grew very strong and confident as a human being there. Like I could do this kind of a lecture or like a discussion today. It is a lot of a huge um, like a credit goes to this masters. Like the things that I learned over there was really helped me. I traveled a lot. I made a great friends. I learned technically also I learned a lot of things, but not as per my expectation. Maybe I had big expectations. The mixed feeling, the bad things were like there were some language issues, so I could not make meaningful connections with the people. Very low job opportunities after I finished master. There was nothing, barely like nothing over there in France uh, for robotics, at least. And then I felt that I did not meet enough passionate people there. That was the main biggest reason. or maybe because I met so many passionate people during my bachelor's with all my all-star batchmates. When I went to masters, I did not see the same passion, same enthusiasm in the people there doing the masters. So I felt a little disappointed over there. So that's why I had a mixed feeling. But overall, it was a good experience. And I don't know yet if because we can only connect the dots backward. Maybe after going few years in the future, I will realize that, oh, I am at this position because I did a master's here. So I don't know the benefits of masters yet. In future, maybe I will get to know. So then I did my, because there was no opportunities big in industry. I thought, okay, why not continue with INRIA itself? INRIA is a good research laboratory. My professor is very well known in the community. So I continued my research at INRIA as a research engineer. It was like so it has been good. INRIA is like a really good workplace over there. We have very nice views. We have a lot of guest lectures, PhD defenses you can attend. Community, it's a very nice community, nice cafeteria, um, lots of work on autonomous vehicle. Then I started with my thesis there. I worked upon uh, object detection in 3D point cloud. I proposed this another network called attentional point net, which got accepted in CVPR and uses attention to sequentially detect different cars in the point cloud. I will not go through the whole architecture. Then there was another thing that I work upon was formal and SMC validation of probabilistic perception systems. So this was the thing because many times we design an algorithm and we do not test it. We just test it on one or two simple cases. But uh, systems like autonomous vehicle, which are mission critical, like even a single mistake in your perception system can make autonomous vehicle take a wrong decision, and then it can be dangerous to a life of a human being. So in such kind of a mission critical system, um, your algorithms that you have designed should be tested for each and every cases, like every scenarios, every edge cases. So the whole thing was to use Carla simulator, design a simulation scenario, and then there was a statistical model checking based approach. So we have a lot of statistics over here, and then we create scenarios, do simulation, we create some trace, we check the properties, we create more scenarios, we create more traces, we check more properties, and we keep going on in the loops to validate this thing, um, like every edge cases and everything over there. Moving on, I would have shown the video, but later. Then I did again worked upon ground estimation and point cloud segmentation. I worked on the same thing during my internship, but that time I used statistical methods, and this time I use purely deep learning based approaches to segment point cloud into ground and objects. So here the green color is the ground and the pink color are the obstacles. Will not go through the maybe quick little video here, for example, like this. So all the objects are getting segmented out, and you can see the ground. Okay, next I also worked upon again on point cloud. So most of my work was on point cloud. Started this work from Singapore, and I kept doing work on point cloud to the point that I'm really bored now. But this one was about another object detection for using point cloud, but this time using RGB camera and LiDAR. So idea was to detect first an object in 2D image using YOLO or some kind of a 2D object detector, then project this into 3D. Because when we project this into 3D or 2D object detection, we get this kind of a frustum over there. We don't have a 3D information, so we can just say that a point in 2D becomes a line in 3D. So 4 points becomes a frustum, and then we know that, okay, this is the car here. So in this frustum, in 3 dimension, there should be some car lying somewhere, and then we use this points inside this frustum to find out where the particular car is. Some of the results, I submitted this paper recently. Let's see if it get accepted. and life as a robotics researchers. So I think it's sort of a roller coaster ride. Good thing about it is that you get a lot of freedom to work upon what things you want to do. In a company, you have a boss. He says that, oh, you do this thing, you do that thing. You have a time bound things. But in research, you have a lot of freedom. You have a lot of freedom to work upon cutting edge technologies. You can fail. You can do whatever you want. Another best thing is that you get to meet the brightest minds in the world. So you get to talk with them, like really good things, and then it really helps you over the period of time. You become bright with them also. Second, if you publish papers, you get to travel different conferences. Some bad things about researcher is that you could never stop thinking about the work. Even if it's Saturday, Sunday, night, day, you are always thinking because it's like your baby. When you go to a industry, it's the work of your industry. If it fails, entire blame goes on the industry. It doesn't goes on you. I mean, it goes on you somehow, but it's responsibility of an industry to handle this thing. Here, if something doesn't work, it's directly blame comes to you. This creates a lot of stress, and also in research, at least in the academic research, we are very poor. Like we don't have a lot of money like industries, so not very poor. I mean, it's you can live a life nicely, but you don't expect to have a lot of money there. Next, I authored 8 research papers in 3.5 years of INRIA and 2 more submitted. If 2 more get accepted, and 10 research papers in past 3.5 years. You should do it. Should you do a research? You should try. Maybe I'll go quickly to the other one. So this is, I think, how many slides? Okay, we have 3 more slides. 3 more slides left. So how to do a publishable research? This is the question I think you should, if you have not been putting a lot of attention before, maybe listen to this one more carefully. So to publish your research work, I think you need I put it into 3 terms. It can be more or less, but you need to do a new and a sensible contribution. Your work should be mathematically sound, and then you have to do a thoughtful experimentation. So when we do a project in our robotics lab, what we do not do is that we do not have something new thing in it. So we have to always keep finding what new I can do, what was never existed before, something that some answers you have to explore that you cannot find on the Google directly. So what are different contributions that you can do? It's like you can come up with your own new approach, propose a new approach, but this is usually very difficult as a bachelor. So at Ivy Labs, what we have come up with a plan is that we're not going to put up a new approach because it's very difficult to come up with original new approach, but rather comparatively it's easy to use an existing approach, but for a new application or a new platform. Let's say there's an algorithm that works for autonomous vehicle, maybe make it work for humanoid. If there is something for work for humanoid, maybe make it work for some another kind of snake robots. So change the platforms or change the applications. Other thing could be is to extend the current approach. Let's say maybe you have 2 approach that you read, try to merge 2 approach and see if the output improves or not. Or you can take an existing approach and do more experimental results on it, evaluate it properly, and then publish a paper. These also count as a contribution, new contributions. Then your work should be mathematically sound. Either you should have a proper direct derivations proof, but it's very difficult, or you can you can have mathematics indirectly using libraries. For example, when you use deep learning libraries like PyTorch or TensorFlow, there's a lot of maths in that, but it's at the back end. So you don't deal with that maths because you're just directly using the libraries. But overall, the whole paper should be mathematically sound. Next, what we don't do after making a project at our in our bachelor's, when we do a project, what we don't do is that we don't do an experimentation with that project. We make a project, we make a cool video, and we stop. But for a publishable research, you need to do some experimentations with that. You have to come up with some performance parameter that indicates the key performance of that particular robotic system that you have made. and then do a quantitative and qualitative evaluation. Okay, beyond masters. So usually beyond masters you can do as a job, as a developer in some industry, or do a research engineer like I did in India, or you can go for PhD. So after PhD, people usually do industrial research and development, or they go into academics. They do postdocs and they become professors. So these are like after masters you have two paths to follow. Direct job, PhD, then do a job, or PhD, then do a postdoc and become a professor, like that. And yeah, so we are coming on to the last slide. There's another possibility that you can do is that you can do your own startup. So my last slide, finally. This is my future venture. Like you see, until now I was all sort of autonomous vehicle detection, perception, deep learning, and all those stuff. And then I completely moved on to something new. I have started my own like a venture. I mean, venture. It's a startup project. It's not startup yet. It's a startup project, I would say. Um, like we call it as Delis Robotics, and I'm trying to use robotic arms to cook food. And so Indria has its own incubator here, and then I secured about 100k euros of funding to develop the startup project. Okay, a cool video, and this is the last thing. So yeah, that was. So it's something called as crepe. It's a French dish. It's like a dosa, but a sweet dosa. So let's put some sugar, some lemon juice on it, and okay. So your crepe is done, and finally some toppings with chocolate. Wow, bon appetit.